So I'm going to be honest. I did kind of lurk a little bit. I saw on your WhatsApp that you had a business account. So I decided to like reverse search your email and find that, just your company tag in the email and figure out kind of what you what you were working at. Yeah, it said business transformation. So that was very interesting. But you were just about to tell me what it is that you sort of are doing here.
Yeah. Well, actually, to go on, the reason I've got the business account for WhatsApp is just because I've got a UK number, which is still active. So I've just got the two WhatsApps. So I've got a UK one with all my UK people on there, and then and then I've got this one that is for UAE and my UAE number.
The number that I call you on, is that a UAE number or is that a?
That's a UAE number.
That's a UAE number.
Yeah.
Okay. So, that makes sense then.
But yeah, no, I was. What was it? What were we talking about? Oh, why I got into restructuring, because you were talking about business acquisition with an intention of using this stuff in order to acquire and add value to the businesses.
Yeah.
And that was the whole reason, in many ways, why I got into financial restructuring, because I thought, what a skill set to have. I had kind of this investor mindset. I wanted to own both, businesses, properties, assets, and I was thinking, what's the, if I was to get this job, or learn this craft to be able to drop into a business, get under the skin of the business quite quickly, and understand those values and drivers, in order to really kind of, in order to really drive value from that, so you could in fact buy a business that's underperforming, get under the issue and what's wrong with it, and actually how can you improve that and add efficiencies. So it's interesting. I've sort of come all this way, and it's the typical thing of you get into it. It's a much deeper rabbit hole than you ever expect it to be, and far more technical. Yeah. Ended up going down much more of an insolvency route than I ever planned.
Business insolvency.
So I was working with insolvent businesses for a long time. Really, actually, up until my last job, that was also a lot of businesses that were in Chapter 11. Worked on contingency planning. One of the interesting, exciting ones, and probably one of the most emotive projects I worked on was Thomas Cook when that went bust, the airline, the holiday company. And
you helped with the insolvency of a that's a hotel company or holiday?
It's holiday. They sold packaged holidays.
Yeah.
And I got this email through in the I'd just been away on holiday actually with TUI, not with Thomas Cook. Yeah. Maybe the reason, maybe the problem. And I just got back and there was this email saying "Welcome to Project Saturn." And I'm like, "What's Project Saturn?" So I opened this email up and start like getting explained what's there's these issues, and there'd been this transaction that they were trying to restructure the debt, and they were in discussions with banks for months before that, from about the February beforehand, and they'd sort of reached this point where they'd said, there are a few hurdles. We think the deal's going to go ahead. 99% sure the deal's fine, but it would be remiss of us if we didn't look at what could happen if it was unsuccessful. Yeah. So we were sort of brought into plan for how would we deal with the fallout from this. There were at the time there was sort of the estimates were 600,000 customers abroad. How do you get them all home? Sort of around Europe and in the US and all those areas. And the more I looked at it, I was like going, they're just going to have to push the deal through, because we can't do this. This is like, it can't happen. Yeah. And it was all sort of very top secret at the time. It was really sensitive, couldn't be out in the public domain, because if you tell people in the public,
you'll get a run on the bank. Everyone will be trying to take the money out,
exactly,
and then you don't have any money to bring the people back if something happened.
That was exactly it. Basically, if you tell everyone, or if you sort of if they know that you're contingency planning for this sort of thing, then they'll go, well, I'm not booking with them.
Yeah, well,
suddenly
I
the
wouldn't.
money dries up, right?
Yeah.
So we're doing this thing in a complete. They didn't even. The message that was going out was it's fine. The negotiations as they were progressing, and that was what was being told to all the employees as well. So the board were like, you can do the contingency planning, but you're going to have to do it over here. You're not allowed on site. You're not allowed to meet anyone. If you need anything, you're going to have to go through the other team, and you're going to have to come up with a backstory. So we're like thinking, we're doing it in this bubble, in this vacuum, and spent a good month or so pulling this thing together. And it was and every single week would get to the end of the week, and we would basically, get this update where they would say, hurdles are a little bit higher. We're probably 95% now. There's a little bit more, but it's probably fine. And then it was like 90%. Then it was 75% chance of going through. And then we were like, about 2 weeks before, we were like, okay, it's probably about 95% likely that this isn't going to work out. There's a slim chance, but this is very real now. We have to be prepared for this thing to fall in 2 weeks.
At what point did they tell their employees, or did they?
They told their employees on the day of insolvency.
Oh my goodness!
And so we were introduced. We were allowed to go on site and actually start meeting people and actually start gathering the data in real, terms, and making sure we had what we needed for this thing about a week or so beforehand. So it was your typical kind of last minute, we thought we had this information, but actually and we could actually bring people into the tent who were working at the company and say, how would you deal with this? Theoretically, everything's fine, don't worry. And there were times when we were in meetings. I remember coming out of one meeting and this lady that was really helpful. She was like, you could tell like the way the conversation sort of gone, and she'd become a bit sort of quieter. And we came out the meeting. There'd been a few of us in there, and she just sort of burst into tears on me and was like, this feels too real to be theoretical, to be like, it feels, and I was like, oh, it's, and you're like, I knew at this point by the final week, we were like, it's 99.9% sure that this, we are planning for an insolvency that is happening. But at the time, you actually, because there is a slim slither of hope, you are actually still putting it out there. But there was also a lot of leaks and stuff as well. I developed a budget for how much is it going to cost us
to pay off people,
to know how much would it cost to keep the fleet running. In order to get everybody home, because one of the issues that we had was it was during the time when when there was some Boeings that were taken out of circulation because of they had the new
737 Max.
That's it. And they were grounded because of the autopilot.
Yeah.
So it was at that time when those were all grounded. So they'd been pulled out of the global fleets, everyone's fleets. So there was a shortage in supply. Plus we were at peak season when everyone's out there. And usually what happens when when an airline runs into trouble or something is all the other airlines bandy together and say, well, we've got spare seats. You can use ours. But because of the shortage of supply, that wasn't an option. And because Thomas Cook was so huge, there was just no chance of that happening. So we had to figure out other ways of, okay, well, how do we keep the Thomas Cook fleet flying during this time after insolvency and such like, and even the extent of the time period that the actual date that you push the button had to be thought about, because you don't want to be making a business. Basically, we had to pick the time. There was a reason that it went bust at 3 a.m. in the morning on a Monday morning, because that was the time when there were the fewest airplanes in the air at the time. And then it all happened, and we arrived on that Monday at the various offices, and another company were involved in going to all the shops on that the sort of retail sections and all the shops on that day, and that's when the employees actually found out that these rumors that were leaking into the press and stuff were sort of true, that it had gone. It was a really charged project, and
it's a light way to put it. Holy smokes,
it was horrendous. And it's one of the I've done various sort of, whether it be presentations or public sort of speaking of some kind, and things like that. And by far my worst one I had to do was basically telling sort of about 50-60% of the IT staff that they were going home that day. And it was it's just not it's not a nice thing to be involved in that point. But also you see people during these times of crisis at their absolute best as well. There people respond in different way, and yeah, people were absolutely, amazing. The staff there, they really bandied together. They
Mm-hmm.
were like, people are still on holiday.
Yeah.
How do we get them home?
Yeah.
And it was actually incredible. It was actually the biggest peacetime repatriation. It was the biggest UK repatriation since Dunkirk at the time.
Yeah.
And biggest peacetime repatriation right up until COVID happened, when they had to bring everyone home. But that was an easier one because all the airlines had all capacity, because they were just going to bring them home and then park the planes. Whereas this one, we had to figure out how to keep the planes going whilst all business was coming apart at the seams.
Yeah. Holy smokes. With that, welcome to the Canadian Specific Podcast.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah, sorry, that was
That's a long intro. Yeah, I like the cold open format, but I'm your host, Jaden Marshall. Today I got Marcus on. I don't know if you want to share your last name or not now, but
Marcus Connew. Yeah,
perfect. That's insane. That's a wild story. I was with the Canadian military for a while, and I was deployed to Kuwait, and obviously nothing like what you just described, but for a time they wanted us to review the repatriation plan for Canadians in the local area, just in case something happens. Every country has a plan that's always going, and I wasn't directly involved with that, but I got to see some of that from the side, and that's nuts that you actually got to participate in like operating in that. I'm from like a weird world where like all the things you don't want to happen is like what I would love to do for work. Like I would love to be a part of something like that, but I don't want that to take place. So that's that's wild.
It is one of those things. There were a lot of stories like that where they're not very pleasant to run through. You have a lot of sleepless nights, and having to, it's as much about, there's the technical aspect of what are you doing with the business and with the money and reporting to various stakeholders and stuff, but there's the very human aspect of it as well.
I find it strips away all the complexities of whether it's bureaucracy or all the things that don't actually matter. Like, when all these levels of management that you don't really need, like you find the guy who needs to do the thing and you just say, what do you need to do the thing? They tell you, you get it to them, and then they do it.
Yep.
I imagine you had a lot of that. And when you're finally in those positions, like everything's a bit more streamlined. If you're confident, know what you're doing, they'll just leave you alone to do your work, and you just ask for help. And yeah, did you ever take like I think it's called ISO 100? I can't remember what it's actually for, but it's emergency planning. It was built after the California wildfires way back. They've had many sequels of those wildfires now in California, but they created like a emergency management system tool that was made by both like civilian world and the military world, because they have different strengths and different things they can bring up with them. Have you ever received any training or heard anything about that before?
No, I haven't. What's that?
So it would be like, if like, let's just use a small town as an example. If there's an emergency in a small town wildfire, it would have like a system of like, here's how you would implement like an emergency response crew. Here's how it would be made up of like, likely it would be made up of people who work for the city or the county or the town, some volunteers, your local firefighter, ambulance stuff, and then here's how you would group everyone off. So you might have someone who's running the show constantly, tracking everything in the headquarters. You might have a guy who's focused on planning. You might have a guy who's a bit more in the military. I was a combat engineer officer, so you'll have your engineer activities. So whether you need to like cut down a bunch of trees to make like a fire break. Maybe not trees, but you make fire breaks and stuff, and so you're gonna need specific people with resources. And just it's not the how to solve the problem; it's the how to organize to solve the problem.
Yeah.
And they even go into little things like if you're at the headquarters and you have a specific job at a certain level, it's like you just have a person assigned to you to just take notes, and all they do is write everything down while you're out doing all the work. And the reason for that is that the guy can just be focused on making decisions and whatnot. And then they just, thinking. And then they just ask the person for information from time to time, however it come up. And they also get into, liaising with with maybe it's like the province or probably not, sometimes the military, but it's how to structure yourself for these types of emergency events. I find this stuff fascinating. Like I think like within operations, like what is it? One, two, I think it's like 8 or 9. There's 9 things that you need to do. 1 personal, 2 intelligence, 3 operations, 4 is like stuff and things. So it'll be like vehicles as well as, well, I'm thinking how I used to work, but that'd be like vehicles, fuel, materials.
Resources.
Resources. Yeah, that's a good one. Like physical, not human resources, but physical. 4. 5 is planning. 6 is signals and communication. 7 is money. No, sorry. 7 is not money. I think 7 is like cooperation with external entities.
Okay.
And then 8 would be money.
I was going to say money has to come in there somewhere.
Yeah, 8 is money. And then 9 is no, I already listed intelligence. I think 9 ended up being PSYOP stuff, which you don't need to do it regularly. So
was this stuff that you guys kind of figured out as you were going?
No, this was stuff. This has been like military doctrine for like a long, long time. So militaries are slow to learn, but when they do finally learn, like they make things real short and sweet. Like one of the things I loved about being in the military was you could ask why, and they would have already told you why. They'll tell you why again, and they tell you in a way that it makes sense. Now warfare change. There's gonna be a lot of people probably upset with that, but like warfare changes. You need to adapt things. But usually, if you can, it's not necessarily caveat, but put it within the context. The explanation works and makes sense.
Yeah.
So like way back when, right? You'd have they call it like tooth to tail. This is now sort of outside of my military training and more like stuff that I've learned more as like a civilian. But it's like the number of fighters you have to the number of support staff that you have. And way back, it used to be a lot more. Usually you just kind of needed to pay people. You didn't need to pay them well because they would loot and pillage, and unfortunately they would also rape, which is not a good thing to do.
No.
But that's what they kind of got out of war. So medium pay, you'd have to feed them, and then you just need to organize them and walk them around and move them and issue orders and stuff. And then as we've gotten bigger, like comms has just become like this huge part of everything, being able to communicate. First, you would have done it they would have had like flags and drums and voice, right? And then now you've got radios, and now they can pick it up, so you need to encrypt those radios and all that sort of stuff. Oh, sorry, no, I did miss one. It was IT. IT was another group within that group that you now have to have. And then as military is transformed into what they are now, they're maneuver elements that are supported by vast number of staff. You need people to repair all of your equipment for vehicles. I guess one more caveat to that list that I gave off earlier. That's kind of like a headquarters list. That's not necessarily, you adapt it to what you're doing. It's not set in stone, but you gotta adapt it to what you're doing. But they even have like battle procedure. I just got my notebook here. That's an amazing tool for whether it's a project or an operation or anything, just like a means of breaking down how you should go about planning. Unfortunately, I don't really get to do this as much anymore because I'm not employed in these types of roles. I was back in Canada and I did do this, and it made work super smooth. I was able to do a budget for a crossing, and I was within so it's like $100,000 plus project, maybe a little less than $100,000, but I was within like $5,000 of the actual cost.
And they stuck to budget.
Yeah. Well, I gave them a hard time, but they managed to stick to budget. It was awesome. But I was part of the planning. But it's like receive warning order, quick time estimate, quick map study, receive orders, mission analysis, issue your own warning order to your subordinates, or civilians don't like that term. Issue them to your followers, your teammates that are below you in the chain of command. Do a detailed time estimate, detailed map study, plan and conduct a reconnaissance mission. Go out, take a look at site before you do it.
Yep.
Man, do we love to skip that in the civilian world that I've seen.
Just wing it. Wing it a prayer.
A little bit, complete the estimate. Plan and deliver a back briefing. Go to your boss and tell him what you're going to do and make sure that he likes it. That's always a good plan. Issue supplemental warning order. If you learn anything new from your back briefing or something comes up from your recce, tell everyone about it now. Prepare and issue orders. Tell everyone what you're going to do, how you're going to do it. Coordinate activities and the requirements of your followers. supervise the deployment, execute the mission, and then when you come back, do an after action review. Probably one of the most important steps on this for sure is what went good, what went wrong, and then remember it for the future, which we don't do. And then your orders, like, I'll just keep going because I'm enjoying this. Your orders are issued in a SMESC format: situation, mission, execution, service support, command, and signals. Here's how everything looks. Here's the no-fail tasks that we have to complete. As a group, here's how you fit into that task and how we're all going to work together to do it. If something happens with Buddy, here's what he was supposed to be doing, so you can now do Buddy's job. Service and support, here's just the stuff that you're going to need, where to get it from. And then command and signals. That was a lot of like, if I die, who's in charge next? If he dies, who's in charge next? Very interesting stuff. And they went, even like how to divide your time, right? If you're an organization, right, 2/3, 1/3 time deviation. So if you've been assigned something and it's by a certain date, and everything should be assigned with a deadline, which is also something that blows my mind that I don't understand how we can operate without deadlines all the time. But you take 1/3 for your planning and stuff, but you make sure that when you issue your orders, 2/3 of all the time that was allocated is they get to use. And you should be updating them of what's sort of going on beforehand anyways. So ideally the battle rhythm would be, well, they're resting and just getting their regular stuff done. You're coming up with the plan, and then you issue it. And then now you relax.
Making good use of time.
Yeah, you relax and you give them some time, and then you somewhere probably about, I can't remember what the actual breakdown would be, because they're now your junior leader is going to use the 2/3, 1/3, and they're going to execute probably at like, I don't know, whatever the execution date does need to be. But
what is it? In sort of summary, it almost feels like, because in many ways these, the forces are an incredible, sort of institution and organization, because you think how long they've been going for, hundreds and hundreds of years, right? And they've adapted through those times. And in many ways, I kind of put it down to they're incredible at creating systems and processes that they can plug people into.
That all not just anyone. They want to figure out like what's the dumbest person.
Yeah.
Like where can we employ them and how do we plug them in? Like as long as you're motivated.
It's like that people talk about, sort of the McDonald's model where you've got teenagers basically running this multi-billion-dollar business.
Well, we had teenagers working with equipment that's like, when you tally it all up, like you're on an exercise, like, millions of dollars, or like the training that's being put into teenagers is so much. And then, like I leave for the civilian world. And like when I first got out of the civilian world, I worked for Canadian Pacific Rail. My boss employed me, I believe, very well. I appreciated a lot of the autonomy that I got, but still, obviously, I still need to be like handheld a little bit of like, here's what we're doing now. This is very different. But he kind of, but he let me at the problem. I think people would, not every young person is just going to thrive once they're in a role. Like, it is what it is. But finding like, how can I actually get the most out of this individual, giving them responsibilities, letting them make decisions, and like, is it okay if they, make the wrong one and learn from it?
I think in many ways it should be, right?
Yeah.
I think the sign of a good leader is priming people to feel safe, to make decisions and solve problems for themselves. Because if you don't do that, then they tiptoe around you and they just want to be told what to do, because if they think for themselves, they'll do something wrong, right?
Learned helplessness.
Yeah.
You teach them to be helpless. I call it learned helplessness. I'm going to do one more lesson and I'll close this book.
Oh, go for it.
10 principles of leadership.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Achieve professional competence and pursue self-improvement. Clarify objectives and intent. Solve problems, make timely decisions. Direct, motivate by persuasion and example, and by sharing risks and hardship. Train individuals and teams under demanding and realistic conditions. Build teamwork and cohesion. Keep subordinates followers. Explain events and decisions. Mentor, educate, and develop followers. Treat followers fairly. Respond to their concerns. Represent their interests. Maintain situational awareness. Seek information and keep current. Learn from experience and from those who have it, and exemplify, reinforce, this is more specific, military ethos, or just whatever professional ethos you got. Maintain order and discipline, uphold professional norms. And a lot of this is like, they'll feel like you care. But what I really like, it's principles and it's not a list, but it's also like, let's say you're put in a position where maybe you don't know everything you need to know. The first one kind of just says, achieve professional confidence and pursue self-improvement. So just, really focus on getting better. Your followers will see that you're getting better. And sometimes like that's all you need to keep the team going. Like,
Totally. And,
you
and
gotta,
actually, when you think about it, that there of sort of making sort of making decisions, taking action when with imperfect information.
yeah,
When do you have perfect information,
yeah,
or when do you have all the information that you require? The majority of times, there's stuff that people aren't going to know,
yeah,
and so I think in that respect, you kind of have to become comfortable with that and know that you're going to make mistakes. And in fact, actually, if there is things you don't know, being the courage probably comes in being vulnerable as
mm-hmm,
a leader with your
mm-hmm,
team,
mm-hmm,
because that then that sets a good precedent for them.
mm-hmm. Yeah, and asking for their ideas, figuring out how to implement them within your plan, and yeah, the perfect plan too late is an imperfect plan.
Mm.
Yeah, military has lots of those little
Yeah,
sayings
yeah.
and stuff like that. But yeah, I think it was something along like the 80% now is better than the 100% too late. So no, I really enjoyed all of that, learning all of that, being a leader, having just amazing people, and then realizing like the followers, like I had some amazing technical experts working for me,
Mm.
like people who could, like on their own run, they could be the bridge sergeant building a bridge, they could be laying minefields, they could, all this sort of stuff, like just amazing people. And just, the best thing that I could do was not like get out of their way. Right.
Yeah.
I'm how, like my biggest thing was like, how do I fit them into the plan that's been laid out to me and then just let them do the rest.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's, it was amazing.
That's like such a profound way of thinking, I think, and actually unusual for a lot of leaders, in that most leaders, I think, well, a lot, not maybe not most, I don't know, but are definitely driven by kind of status, or I'm the decision maker, people need to follow me, and you see it a lot in business now, where everyone seems to think that money is made and value is added in the boardroom,
Mm-hmm.
or on the Excel sheet, on the
Mm-hmm.
PowerPoint slide, and it's like no, it's money. Value is added on the shop floor by the people on the shop floor, not by the people at the top. So a leader should be facilitating them, making how do you make them as efficient as possible? How do you make them better?
Decentralized command. That's what you're talking about. And for every layer of the bureaucracy, it obscures the truth. So when you're pulling decision up, right? They're now making when you pull decisions up the chain, you're now making more decisions with less perfect information instead of allowing people, down below to do that. I pulled a book out of the cabinet. My dad actually got me this book. Shout out to my dad. The Leadership Challenge, probably the best civilian leadership book that I've read. Obviously it's not the same stuff that I talk about or the same stuff that I learned, but it melds. Yeah. Well, I was going to just give it to you now to lend it to you. I'll need this one back though.
Yes.
The note in the front's to me, not to you. So. But they went through the big thing not that I took away. Their learning process was, what were you doing right when you were at your best as a leader? And then that's how they collated. That's how they brought everything together. So all the learning pieces. And so in this, it's now the 5th edition. They have lots of editions, but each edition they add new stories and with the old stories and just show like what were you doing when you were at your best. And then it really does seem to synthesize down to what I was taught, within the military as well. And they talk about boardrooms. I think they even have a couple of really good ones on, like if you were to acquire a business and people are gonna be nervous and you just showed up, how do you break the ice? How do you foster collaboration? I just opened this up. I'm just gonna hand this to you right now before I go through it.
No,
But give it if you're interested, give it a read. It was
sort of
really, really good. Yeah. And then if I was just to throw one more, actually probably two things outdoor. Leadership is the art of influencing others to achieve a common goal. Management is the science of coordinating resources to do something. So, leadership, I definitely very much an art, and just like any art, you got to figure out what you like, what you don't like. You know, you're going to have your own leadership philosophy. You're going to have, you know, try lots of things, imitate lots of people, see what you like, what you don't like. If you don't like it, just throw it away. And you know, not everyone's going to do things the same way. Like, I'm not a yeller, so when I, you know, motivate by persuasion, I can't just persuade people by yelling at them.
Yeah,
you shouldn't.
Yeah,
most people shouldn't do that, but some people from time to time can really interject like that in an effective way where it's not such a big deal. But you know, I can be stern, but I just hate yelling. My dog would run away from me. I'd be walking my dog runs away, and I just kind of like, and I just like walk after the dog, and
you go after him.
Oh yeah, I have to go. Well, this one I have to go after. But I just don't. I can yell. He won't listen, but I just don't like yelling.
I think having a dog is such a great lesson in leadership as well. You know, having to be leader of the pack.
Tell me about this. What's your
my theory?
What's your theory?
Well, I think so many people get dogs, or children for that matter.
Yeah.
They get dogs, and then it's the dog that ends up, you know, running the household, and ruling them. And they're obviously, you know, they're totally dependent upon us and such like. But you know, I think generally it tends to be people kind of, you know, a lot of people will mollycoddle their pets and such like, and that's not necessarily, from what I've seen, how dogs, you know, like to be treated, or no, let's say like is the right word, but you know, they don't respond as well when they're being treated like that, because suddenly they have to be the leader of the pack. You know, if you're running around after them, and so, you know, that's a lot of responsibility, right? You know, they've got to be like, you know, looking out for, you know, dangers and all this, that, and the other. Whereas if you're the one leading and you've got them trained and you've got them sort of, you know, they're looking to you for guidance, then they don't have to worry about all this stuff. They can just, you know, hang around and be a dog.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah. I think about so like with him, I'm not necessarily like chasing him. I just so one of I think the first thing a lot of people don't realize, like when you get a dog, is like the dog wants to live. So you know, if you're feeding him and you're giving him water, you don't have to chase him. You can like he'll go for a bit, and he'll come back, and that's what this one does. Like one time he got off. Someone was taking him for a walk, and then he got off. He actually went to the market here.
Okay.
There's like a little convenience store in the area that we live in, and he sat there and waited for us. And some security guard calls me. He's like, you know, you need to keep your dog on a leash. And it's like, yeah, you have the leash. He ran off with the leash. Someone else was walking him when he totally ran off. But he just sat and waited, and then someone comes and picks him up, and then brought him back here. But so yeah, you don't have to. The dog isn't just gonna run into situations where it's gonna hurt itself, and then don't. Yeah. You know, that's the way to think of it. No, I think you're right. I think you're onto something in the sense of like, you can't, just not coddling. Yeah. I'm thinking, I don't have a full thesis on this, so I'm just thinking out loud now, but.
Yeah, well, I've just thrown it at you, right? So you're running with it. You caught the ball. But yeah, I kind of think, really that, to be fair. And they sort of, I lost my train of thought slightly. But it's kind of a case of there's certain things that, what's the word? No, it's gone, I'm afraid.
Oh, good. You were talking about dogs or kids for that matter, having to be the leader, not coddling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if we kind of back up, I guess, a bit, you know, sort of understanding, you know, again, it's like, you know, you gaining an understanding of your dog as well. From the point of view of, you know, generally, I think it's like dogs, they say that they've got like three kind of drivers. You know, one is the food element, which, you know, a huge number of them, and depending on the breed, depends on how much, quite often, well, not always the breed, but a lot of dogs, you know, have more or greater sort of edge towards that sort of as
more food motivated.
More food
than
motivated.
others. Yeah.
Then there's affection.
Yeah.
And then there's a prey instinct. And you know, like throwing the ball and going back and forth and stuff, and they all have different, you know, or just if they're, you know, they're on the lead and suddenly they see something and just go for it, pull you over, and understanding how your dog responds, you know, it helps you understand how to motivate that dog to do what you want it to do when you're training it and such like. And in many ways, you look at other forms of leadership. You know, how are you ever going to influence someone if you don't know what influences them? Yeah. What is the key thing that drives that person? Why do they do what they do?
Yeah. Why are they here?
What is their map of the world? And if you can understand that, then you can become far more effective.
Yeah, a lot of it is I would kind of describe it like you can't necessarily be like best friends or buddy buddy, but you know, a lot of it we would call it like just being a dude,
Mm.
right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
you're in your position is important, but just be a dude, you know, sit,
Yeah.
talk, eat with them, you know, hear about what they're doing, you know,
Absolutely.
if they got things to complain about, let them complain, you know, and then you know, from time to time, you know, if things are going well, send people home early, and then when you need them to stay late, it's easy to it's harder to say no when you know that they actually like care about you, like you know representing their interest is like for me a real big one that you know not a lot of people get. And when you can foster like a real big one is it's easier to call someone in the middle of the night, wake them and their spouse up and ask them, you know, for assistance if you've met their spouse
Yeah.
and if their spouse knows you. Sometimes like when you have like military works in a command team orientation, so you've got like an officer type there, and then you've also got a non-commissioned member. He's a very technical guy. He's there to keep you from having stupid ideas.
Mm-hmm.
But you work together as a team to provide leadership, mentorship, training, expertise to your group, which the civilian world doesn't do. They don't do command team stuff at all. They've got it. You're a company officer or you're a employee, unionized guy, and then there's like, you know, they don't just bring people up to have chats about things. At least that's not what I've seen.
In the civilian world.
In the civilian world, yeah. It's like it's clear cut, you know. So
Well, I think that most people have grown up in the civilian world and in corporations. Like they most people get managed.
yeah,
There's a difference, you know, like a manager saying, you've got to do this because I've told you to do this, and giving people tasks, but not actually inspiring them for, you know, this is what we're trying to achieve and this is why. And if people, you know, if people go up through the ranks having only ever been managed, well, that's what they see as that's how you are leading. You become a manager of
Yeah.
people, and that really limits probably the number of people that you can actually influence and the number and the ways in which you can actually the depth at which you can actually influence them, I reckon.
yeah. There's a lot of people rolling their eyes at me right now because I
really?
just keep dropping these. But people don't rise to the occasion; they sink to their lowest form of training. So just because you like are excited to be in a leadership role, if you haven't practiced, and like I mean like something simple as like when you're a kid and you have the opportunity to be a leader as part of your sports team, whether you're the what do they call them? Not MVP, the captain of the team, right? If you're the captain of the team or you're trying to be a part of the leadership of like some sort of club or something like that, even just as a kid, you know, that's a really good way to like have to trial and error this before you're out, you know, in the real world, because it's quite often you get hired and now you're not going to be put in a leadership space for quite a while. And then when you're finally there, if you've never had a chance to practice and to learn and to think and to talk to people about all this, you know, you're going to do exactly what they showed you, which you're talking about with, you know, being a manager instead of, you know, a leader. But then like, man, some of this stuff brings back some real, when I worked for CP, they're this big, I'm just trying to figure out how to phrase this in a kinder way. They have this big thing where they're like, you know, oh, we're not managers, we're leaders. It's like, yeah, but the leadership training that you're providing isn't very good. And you guys are struggling just to manage right now. So why don't you, you know, just because you change what you're calling yourself doesn't improve anything.
Doesn't make you, yeah. And many people struggle to manage.
Oh yeah.
You know, that's a skill set in itself.
Yeah, the Peter principle. The guy, I think his name was Peter, but he wrote a book on how, you know,
Narrows it down.
we promote people to a higher position based on how they performed at a lower position. But sometimes it's a completely different tool set. It's a completely different job set. So just because you're a guy, like I'll just use, I use track, you know, stuff, you know, railroad stuff. Just because you're a really good welder at the company doesn't mean you should be a welder foreman. Especially if we haven't provided you with any training. Now they're unionized, so it's all about how much time you got, and then they bid the job, and then we provide them with training after. But when you look for people and you promote them in, you know, up in companies, what the Peter Principle really says is we promote people to the point of incompetence. So we'll move you up the company until the point where you're like, yeah, you can't do this job. It's obvious. And now we just won't promote you again. But we won't demote you. Maybe we'll move you to the side. And then there's the a really good one is the Dilbert principle. The guy who wrote Scott Adams wrote Dilbert. Is we when we have like a problem employee, we promote them to the place where they can do the least damage to the business, which is management. He goes into a bit more about why we see people who aren't very good get promoted into management. Some of it is like if they're not very good, they get moved around jobs lots. So it builds up their resume really nicely. And people that we do like, we don't move around. So then their resume shows as less. So then they get hired into a higher position in a different department within the same company or at a different company. I'm really fascinated by organizational structure and design, organization behavior, some aspects of like human engineering, which doesn't really, sometimes it applies to this sort of stuff, sometimes it doesn't. But just how to organize and perform work, and what, you know, even something as important as like culture, like work culture, can really just change the game.
I read a really great book recently, actually. I'll have to, I think I've got it upstairs. I'll lend you a book in return for this one. It's called The Culture Code by Daniel Coyle.
Okay.
I think it is. And it's absolutely, it's all about not just corporate, you know, but it looks at those as well. It looks at all these successful teams, you know, from basketball to ice hockey to...
Oh, right on. Yeah.
And it's like what made these groups so successful, where they outperformed their peers, where sometimes on paper you'd look at stuff and go, well, you know, this team should be far better. You know, you look at the actual quality of the people, the individuals within. So why is one team performing and why is another, you know, not? And actually a fascinating example that he actually opens the book with is one where they did this, it was called the straw and marshmallow test. And basically, it was an experiment where they were given these. They were given, I think it was straws and sellotape, a yard of sellotape, and a marshmallow, and they had to build the highest tower. The teams had to build the highest tower out of these straws using tape, and then the only rule was you could build it any way you liked, but the only rule was you had 17 minutes to do it in, and the marshmallow had to go on the top and it had to stand up. And they found that the group of kindergartens consistently outperformed the CEOs and the MBA students. And you know, the only groups that actually outperformed the kindergartens were fortunately the structural engineers. Which was a relief.
That's good.
Because they knew all about the triangles and all the different, you know, those bits and pieces. But it's and so he was looking into, you know, why?
Because they're not followers.
And they're not, you know, the typical thing that you find when you put a group of people, you know, together is they start, you know, they spend, you know, they've only got 17 minutes to do this thing in. You know, they spend most of that time, you know, they start like brainstorming ideas, and, you know, there's a bit of a kind of jostling for, you know, jostling for position. Who's going to be the leader of this group and stuff. There's a bit of politics going on at the same time. Who's going to, you know, whose idea is going to win out. And then they kind of, you know, do the pros and cons of each one. And eventually they realize with 3 minutes to go that, you know, we're going to go for this idea. And they've got 3 minutes to figure it out. Whereas the kids basically just no planning, no thought, just like got together and started just building stuff. And they'd be there like, you know, shoulder to shoulder just going, no, try this. No, try this. No, try, you know, and they were just totally, no one was, you know, no one was trying to kind of, you know, be the leader or be the, you know, like it wasn't status driven. It was just, they were just trying to do the job and, you know, working together.
Yeah. I can't remember who came up with this idea, but I think it was like when it's about group formation and there's like 4 or 5 different, so it was like, where it kind of talks about like what the group's going to go through before they get to the end. So you throw a group together and you've got, forming, norming, storming, performing, and then what's the last one? It's just where like you're constantly
adjourning.
Oh yeah.
Or I was making it rhyme there.
Yeah.
Adjourning, or what's the other one?
Just where you're cycling people through. You're
either
losing
that,
people,
it's either
new
that
people
or there's
coming
a new
in.
project. It's either that or the team moves on to a new project. So it's kind of that cycle.
Yeah. And I really like, and so I did a lot of like courses in the military, right? So and they're usually pretty demanding, and just it's a new group of people, and it's the same thing every time. The first week, everyone's like performing pretty well, they're getting to know each other, And then second week, things sort of taper off a bit, but you can see some feathers ruffle. Third week, fourth week, people are upset with each other, all this sort of
Falling
stuff.
out, yeah.
There's falling outs. And then you kind of refigure it all out, and then you finally get to a point where you start performing as a group together, and you don't have to like everyone, but we're all going to get along. And
Figured out how to work together.
figured it out.
Who's good at what,
Yeah.
and who's kind of where they can.
And I think with the pressure, as well as like you're together 24/7, don't expect to like just get a team together and expect all this to work out within like the month and a half that I described. It's going to take a lot longer for like a regular work site where you're only working 8-hour days, hopefully. Yeah. All right, I'm just going to take a quick break and we'll be right back.
Cool.
Yeah. All right, and we're back. You had a question.
Yeah, I was asking how you. What was the reason behind joining the military and how you came into that career?
So I used to be in Sea Cadets as a kid, actually, which is different than the Army. But I'd kind of make fun of that a little bit. We kind of used to make fun of people who used to be Sea Cadets before, or cadets in the cadet program before they came over to the military. But I used to be a part of that, and I really enjoyed it. I would do that during the year, and then during the summers, like you're a kid, right? During the summers, they would then this is all covered by the government. Yeah. They would fly me from Alberta to BC to Comox, which is a little spit where it was HMCS Quadra, and you show up and you do they sort of do like training during the summer. And so first you're just there for 2 weeks, and I think they gave you, I can't remember how much money it was. They actually paid you to be there a little bit. Yeah. I don't think it was $60 a week. Maybe it was $60 a week, but a certain amount of money. The idea was you can buy treats, and if you need new socks, you can buy socks. But it's just something to get the kids also a little excited. And they flew you there, and your parents got 2 weeks without you, and I enjoyed it. And then the next year, now you're there for 4 weeks, and this is what you're doing. And then the last year I was there, I was actually there for my entire summer, 8 weeks, and it was a marine engineering course. And I got certified as like a cadet as a marine engineer cadet for these Orca class vessels. And we spent, I think I spent 8 days, might have been more than 8 days in total aboard this ship, over a couple of stints. And it's kids with a couple of adults running the ship.
Amazing.
So there's like a legitimate marine engineer on board. There's a legitimate CO running the ship and XO, but it's staffed by if all the kids were gone, they wouldn't be able to run the ship. So a lot of responsibility. I like it. So that sort of opened me up to that, and then I left that in my last year. You end up aging out. I actually left a little bit before aging out, just because I was going off to university, and I was like, I'm gonna go be a bit more of an adult and less of a not that you're not an adult, or there's a lot of great stuff going on there, but I'm just gonna go do other things right now. But then I ended up kind of missing some of that, and then I was like, I'll while I'm in university, there's the reserves I learned about. I was like, I'll go join the reserves, and actually I was interested in possibly studying at the Royal Military College in Canada. Good thing I didn't do that. They got a real high suicide rate.
No way.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. I think it's better now. Maybe. I don't know. It's not great.
Causes of that?
Yeah. Pardon?
Do they know the causes?
You have to do your schooling along with a lot of military stuff, and it's not a bunch of people coming into university at like slightly different times. It's all at the same time. So now you got all these kids who are like 18. All of them are 18.
Yeah.
And they're 18, 19, 20, 21. And they're put in like groups that have to like do drill, and they got to make their beds every morning. And there's some like military aspect on the side of it. So there's a lot of work that takes place outside of the education. You have the education, and then in the summers you go off and train. And it's just a lot of young people all the time. And yeah, you're doing school while doing a lot of other stuff, and that can just be a lot.
Yeah.
And maybe they're not necessarily meeting people with a lot of different life experience, right? Most of your experience is still high school, so you can't just talk to someone who has been through something before. Like a lot of my time what I really liked also about the military while I was there is like I got to meet people, like there were men of various ages all with various different life experiences. And so
Yep.
anything that was happening to me, someone had it worse, probably more times. And you just, or, you just hear about what people are working through, dealing with. There's a lot of camaraderie in that. But also, when you didn't know what to do, someone can at least
You
bounce
could turn
ideas
to
off.
someone, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's just so much experience, versus, when you got like 5 18-year-olds and some guy's like, I don't know if I should break up with my girlfriend or not. And, you're not going to get a lot of help from an 18-year-old, but then someone else will be like, well, what do you think about this? How are you feeling about this? What's it like when you do this?
Yeah.
Do you like the family? Do you like her friend? Like, there's a lot of things you can really think about that you don't know when you're 18. But sorry, I was going. But I decided that I wanted to join in the reserves, and I applied halfway through my first year of university, and I got in my second year university, and then I just went off and trained. And so in the summers, I was employed. They did. I was working during the year, like Wednesdays, one weekend a month, or one weekend every other month, depends on how the budget was. But every Wednesday, I was showing up, and there'd be training. I'd be getting a little bit of pay. It was like $99 a day was the pay. And if you got
So
paid,
you were a rich student.
well, no. So I did the math on one of my courses, and because you're there 24 hours a day, I was making $4.20 an hour. And when you're certain parts of it, you're in the field, so you really are working like 24 hours in a day. And I was getting
sleep deprived.
I'm sitting there, like you're freezing cold, and you got your rifle with you, and you're watching, and someone's gonna come mess with you later, and it's like, $4, and I just made $4.20, perfect, But you don't do it really for the money. But as you stick with them longer, so by the time I graduated, my pay had gone up. I can't remember to how much. It was actually like quite a bit. I think it was like $175 or almost $200 a day. 175 or maybe 100. But it would be like in one night, I was making now like $70 for 3 hours of work on a Wednesday night. And then if I was going for a weekend, it'd be like $400 or something like that. And it's like, that's good money as a student just to make $400 in a weekend. But they also, like, so much of the military is training based. So then I would just receive all this training in the summer, all these different courses, and they promised to employ me for each summer that I was there. And I ended up staying on even after I graduated, but they would train me and employ me for 4 summers. And then when I graduated, I had actually gone on like a brigade exercise that was also with the regular force guys, so the guys that are doing it all year round. And when I came out of the field, I was notified that I had gotten a tour. So I graduated and then immediately went on a tour to Kuwait here in the Middle East.
Wow, yeah.
How old was I? 20. I think I was 22.
That must have been exciting.
Oh,
age,
yeah.
like you were.
Yeah.
Is that that's what did it for you? Like,
well,
sort of when you made the decision that I'm going to go into this.
Well, no, what did it? I loved it from the very beginning. I loved being a combat engineer. We'd go out on a weekend, and you show up, and like in one morning, there was no bridge, and now you just built a bridge. You
That sense of completion.
did it. We worked with explosives. Like, you go on a weekend, you're just playing with C4, and you go out and you shoot guns for a weekend, and you're getting paid. And you get to be loud and exciting, and just everything was so focused. It's like you could, our goal is to do this, and all we're gonna do is figure out how to do this, and then you go and you just do it. And you're just so focused, and I enjoyed it so much. And the people that I worked with are just amazing. I had to get out of the unit before coming here, unfortunately. I thought I was going to be with them.
So you were in the unit right up until
I came to the UAE.
What brought you to the UAE then? What made you?
I'll get there.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. Sorry, I'm jumping ahead in the
story.
story.
No, it's all good. Went on tour for 6 months, 2019. Came back to Canada 2020. Then COVID hit. Got hired on with the railway in Canada, so I worked for the railroad and the military part-time. Was there for 2 years. And then a coworker of mine who had worked all over the world, that was back working at CP. I'd worked with him for 2 years now. He was coming out here for a job with Etihad Rail, And when he was leaving, I said, "Hey, you know, if something comes up, let me know." He's like, "You sure?" I was like, "Yeah." And, you know, I'd worked in the Middle East before, a little bit different situation, but it wasn't combat. We were Joint Task Force Impact. We were here to help train militaries in the area, and then show Canada's dedication to peace in the Middle East.
Okay.
That was our slogan. The slogan was actually worded differently. I can't remember what the official wording was, but now coworker left. I'd been here before. To me, the Middle East was an unanswered question still. Like, I still felt like I had a lot to learn about the culture and what's going on here. Because one of the big things I learned was stop watching the news. When I came out here and I saw what was going on, like Iraq was having these protests, people were dying, and like wasn't nowhere in the news back in Canada. It was nice for my family though, because they didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
At one point, things got real heated. Like, I was in the Middle East when Soleimani, the expeditionary general for Iran, was drone. Actually, I don't know. We don't really know what struck him, but he was on the ground in Iraq for like 5 minutes. That's how good the intel was, and then he was just dead. Like, they got him with a missile of some type, air to ground something, and yeah, just gone. And so then everything got real hot. Iran's excited. We're excited. They started moving like ballistic missiles kind of within in an area where they could be in range with us. You know, this is all like high level. It's not high level intel as in like secret or anything. Just like it's all very high level stuff. It's not like the technical and the weeds of like what actually was going on. But they just moved it, and then actually I remember a story where, oh man, I'm all over the map. Let me double back a little bit. So that's what, I was here. It was exciting. Unanswered question. Coworker comes here, and then he ends up asking for my resume. And then the interview got pushed off like 3 times. I was very nervous, and then I ended up getting hired. And then ended up quitting my job at CP. I sprayed lawns for rich people for a summer, which was very eye-opening for a friend of mine, just to keep busy. My wife was like doing her practicum and school stuff, and I was just hanging out, waiting to come over here, having a great time, taking my dog for bike rides to the river valley. She was a half border collie, still is alive, a half border collie, half blue heeler, and it would be like gone for like a 2-hour bike ride. And she'd just be running the whole time off leash through the river valley. I love that dog. I like Kilo too, new dog here, kilometer 47. But yeah, so and you know, like I wouldn't be able to say no to an opportunity to just go travel and see the world and work. And I get to provide, like, I'm married, got married almost 2 years ago. August 1st will be our 2nd year anniversary. That's probably coming quick. I should probably start thinking about that.
Yeah, you need to.
I started thinking about things. But I was able to provide an opportunity for, you know, my wife to come and see the world, and hopefully I think she should be able to find work here. And this would also be like a huge career maker for her as well, if she decides to let me be like a house husband one day.
I'm sure that's on the cards.
Yeah, for sure. But some people aren't very, I don't know if I would say I guess I am by definition adventurous, but
it sounds like it's been an adventurous life.
Oh yeah, wow, yeah. Well, and like to put it all together, like I grew up on a acreage in Canada, which has its own type of own type of lifestyle, and then, you know, coming to the city, going to university, military tour, railroad, was going through the Rockies. In the Rocky Mountains, they've got spiral tunnels on the rail line, so the train will enter the mountain. The track will go through the mountain, and as it's going through the mountain, it spirals down and actually exit underneath the opening. So you'll have the locomotive of the train going into the mountain, and as it's coming out, it's actually coming out underneath of itself, and they built that through a mountain. These 1800s engineers are like absolutely amazing, and surveyors too. There's like I'm very confident there's a lost art, because they don't have any of this like CAD software that we have now. And they're just like, yeah, we're just gonna punch a hole through the mountain and come out underneath. And they did it twice. Yeah. They did it twice. They go through one mountain, come out, and it goes right into another mountain, does another spiral, and then leaves. And they're like, yeah, this is the engineering solution to get through this real rickety area. And I mean, that is the engineering solution, and it worked. And they would have dug from both ends, and they would have met right in the middle of the mountain. Unbelievable.
Who needs like technology for this
Yeah,
planning?
yeah.
Just,
Well, whenever I hear, I like conspiracies, and I really like planning for the end of the world as much as anyone. But whenever like, oh, the world's going to go to crap and all this sort of stuff, it's like people were able to do a lot of stuff before. There's going to be a lot of institutional knowledge that we might have to relearn, but someone's going to remember how to do this or be able to figure this out. Or we got books, and people cooperated in the Wild West. Like, just because the power's gone out doesn't mean you have to eat your neighbor. I don't think.
no, I think there's clearly plenty of challenges and stuff in the world at the moment, and but I global warming being a massive one, right? For example, but I truly have faith that we've come up with solutions so far, and that I think we will eventually. Someone will come up with it. It might take a crisis for us to eventually figure it out, but and actually. I'll get on to sort of another sort of another thing I've been reading actually about sort of the idea that a potential crisis is looming.
Yeah.
If we don't feel like we're already in one.
Yeah.
It sometimes takes that sort of things for us all to bandy together and go, actually, this isn't working. Here's a solution, and here's how we're going to implement it, and then it kind of changes a whole generation. We sort of fix the problems and then move on into sort of a better time.
Yeah, well, the ozone layer is the perfect example. Remember that ozone layer? The hole was getting bigger and bigger.
You never hear about that anymore.
Well, because we fixed it.
Oh, right.
It's okay now. We did need to make a change, and then we made a change, and it shrunk. And
how do I not know about this?
Well, because it's not a problem. Yeah, if it were a problem, it'd be on BBC or CBC. They'd be telling you about it.
There's no giant hole in the ozone there.
We're gonna. Well, I think there's still a hole. I think there's always a bit of a hole, but let me just triple check this so that I'm not just spreading misinformation. But hole.
How was it fixed?
Well, we stopped using CFC gases and some of our compressors as well. Like refrigerant, we were using harmful refrigerants, and part of like hair. I think it was like hairspray. Some of the propelled gas cans, like whether it's spray paint, hairspray, all that sort of stuff, we were using toxic chemicals that were eating a hole, and we switched and banned those, and kind of even like with asbestos, right? We ban it, and then we create ways to process and deal with it later. So I'm very we need to do things. It's not an excuse not to do anything, but I think you're right. I think what a lot of this sort of comes around to is we seem to forget that like incentives are real. Like we know incentives. Like we sort of forget that this might be a bit of a hot topic, but I'm okay with it. Like when you think of something like COVID, it turned out not to be as dangerous as everyone thought about it immediately, and everyone thinks like, oh, this is a failure. Like we had a dress rehearsal and we failed for a pandemic. And my thought is, if I was driving to work and I saw someone dead face down in a ditch, I would go home. If I don't really know, I might have had like one or two people really impacted, maybe one passed away. I can't remember off the top of my head. But part of that's also my cohort, right? Being a young person. But if people that I knew were passing away, I would 100% take it seriously. Like if I really
eating zombies.
Yeah. And so I think with with things like applying this to something that's less controversial, climate change, when you see what's happening, people will make their decisions, and we're incentivized to not have the world crumble around us. And I look at so we in Alberta, province I'm from in Canada, they have a real good conservation group for the province. They're amazing. They're actually spectacular. I mean, they're a little slow and people complain about things, but as like an actual conservation effort, how they use their money, how they manage everything is actually like one of the best in the world, I think, 100%. But we're not really incentivized to destroy the environment. we're incentivized to make sure that our kids can fish in the same waters that I did. You know, that's what we want. Like no, when people are upset, like when sort of environmentalists nowadays are like super upset, something I think about is like, well, you know, there's people who want to work and make money, but they also don't want to like have their kids inherit a world where they don't have access to this. So you know, if you tweak your argument a little bit to like, we need to be able to sustain ourselves and sustain the environment because we're both trying to sustain like our families and our kids and our friends and our countries. So I think there's a way to work between it. And we've seen like with the conservation efforts, we've seen, you know, from time to time we see a dip because we weren't conserving things properly in populations of animals. And I think right now fish is a real big one in the oceans. But then we make changes. I think the whitetail population in North America is kind of healthier than it's been in a long time. We see real improvements. Sometimes you need a drastic change, like we got like zebra mussels in the Great Lakes, which is a big problem. These are invasive species. That's a whole other thing that's not necessarily like humans are making poor decisions every day. We made one poor decision and now we have to pay for it for a very long time. That's tough. That's tough stuff to get through. But you know, I guess I think about incentives, and I think, you know, what separates us from the animals is our ability to change our environments. Beavers can do that too, and they can cause a lot of disaster, but beavers aren't going to the moon unless we bring them with us. So I think we can change the environment also in a good way.
Yeah.
So yeah, a bit of a ramble,
amazing how
but
quick it's amazing how quick nature, you know, recovers as well.
Oh yeah.
You just saw it like when the world locked down, right? How suddenly, you know, skies were clearing, and you know, it was incredible the changes that went about there.
Yeah, try not moving like right now we're in the Middle East. You know, if you don't move sand often, it just accumulates on the tracks, and the tracks will just be gone.
Yeah.
You know, like upkeep and maintenance. Like we're constantly, you know, getting mold out of homes. We're constantly making sure the spiders stay out. They will, if you just left a building and just like look at Chernobyl, like completely overgrown. It's not been too long, and nature's just taken over so quickly.
40 years?
Yeah.
40 years? Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just trying to find it here where it says how big the ozone was. Yeah, I'm pretty confident it said it was getting bigger, and then they made some changes. They always put the good stuff in the articles at the bottom.
That's because it wouldn't be a story, right?
Yeah.
If they put all the good stuff at the beginning, you wouldn't read it.
Yeah, exactly. Emissions, avoid, availed, help prevent, near massive depletion, long recovery. Where are we at now? This is not very exciting stuff to listen to. I see why now all these other podcasts have people just sit there to fact check and do all the sound and stuff, because it's a little tougher to do it on the
fly.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's bigger. The ozone says here the hole that's a weather thing. Let me just type fixed. This is not what you're supposed to do, because if you just Google what you're looking for, it'll tell you that's what it is. But yeah, okay. Ozone layer may be restored in decades, UN report says. Okay, so maybe they didn't fix it, but it's shrinking. Yeah. Ozone hole. Direction. Here we go. NASA, ozone hole continues to shrink in 2022. NASA and NOAA scientists say. So it's getting smaller. But, you know, we're reversing it. Yeah, that's the positive. Not 100% fixed. Now, I won't say that again later, but we made a change, so that's good.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, we've been kicking this off for an hour, and I mean, if you would like to, we could probably do this again.
Absolutely. I'd love to come back. I've enjoyed this.
Then we'll cut her short there. But thanks so much for coming on. Is there, I don't know, it's weird. When I listen to other podcasts, they're like, do you want to plug anything? So do you want to...
I've got nothing to plug.
Perfect.
At this moment.
Okay. Well, thanks for coming on, and we'll do this again.
Excellent. Yeah. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah. Take care.